thing that I said. You know, by the time I bring people in, new people in with new skills, or I retrain the people that I've got, and with the newer technology, I'm going to end up spending, and then from a support perspective as well. And really, I guess those are two separate issues: a resource, a manpower, a training issue, versus.
Because one of them's not going to change no matter where you go. I mean, and the other, you know. So.
Well, I would keep. So from the support standpoint.
Okay. Well, from the support. No.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
That's
we
okay.
have
1, 2. Okay.
Yeah. You know, from a support standpoint, again. You're going to have to do that anyway. I mean, there's always going to be, it's very, very rare that that you're going to have the vast amount of support that you need for whatever software project you buy, okay? Whether it's, it's closed box, commercial proprietary software, or open source software out there. The one advantage about an open source software project is that usually, because it is so widely used, the number of potential vendors is much larger. Obviously, if you're looking at, like, let's take Oracle, database as an example. I mean, these are the guys who know, they know the code. No one else knows the code. So really, if you want to get that warm and fuzzy feeling, for support, you've got to go to them. It's sort of like a single source. Whereas for Linux, for example, Red Hat is most probably, one of the better ones out there, but there are other people out there as well. So the wide ubiquitous of open source technology means the vendor set is much larger. Because most of the people, especially younger developers that you're pulling in, have been using open source on their own, either through school or because it's what they're compelled to do. You have this untouched talent of support internal. Again, these are people who know the software at a very, very deep, low level, much more so than anybody who's just a user of commercial software is concerned. So by having those two parameters together means that, really when you look at it over the long term, your support costs, when you factor in everything, are most probably going to be reduced by being, by using a judicious use of open source technology rather than commercial.
Can I add to that real quick? So I think it was Forrester today was talking about the business case, right? So and I come from a security side a lot of times in fighting these battles with closed security companies, which is actually the norm for the most part. The models are not open. And I always tell them, you need to open up, because I don't need you to require me to depend on you to execute on your business plan for 5 years when I may not even be able to necessarily execute on mine. So in that situation, that open, agile ecosystem for security is always a struggle between can they create a business case for something that I need that I might not know that I actually even need, especially with the iterations of the security cycles. Whereas in the community, they don't have to have a business case. I think it was brought up, the pride and the effort. One guy may create something and there may only be 50 people that say, wow, man, you just, rocked that out. And then he goes on to do something else because he doesn't have to have this profit motive, this business case within a lot of large corporations that is required to actually move something forward.
You want to say something? Yeah. Yeah, from the support cost perspective, I don't think we necessarily focus on there's more support costs or necessarily less support costs from an open source approach. One of the things I think that we struggle with is a company like ours where we do have, say, enterprise agreements in place, that maybe some of the support costs that you could save don't necessarily go away because you've got these enterprise agreements with large companies like Computer Associates and Microsoft and so forth. So while there may be benefits, you don't necessarily defer costs that are going to be there anyway. So one of the struggles are, if you've got these enterprise agreements in place, do you try to take advantage of all the technology that's in the enterprise agreements, so therefore you're more tied to the agreements, or do you try to embrace some of the other technologies that allow you to potentially lessen the commitment to the enterprise agreements?
Right.
But in those cases, you're not leveraging the true total cost that you're putting into the agreements. So that's kind of a struggle, from one enterprise agreement to the next. What is going to be your strategy? Is it to leverage every bit of the technology in that agreement, or is it to kind of position yourself where you've got some leverage the next time around?
And that's assuming you're going to get better support from the closed source
Right.
model. I haven't necessarily always found that to be the case. I mean, and unfortunately, you can have very large projects completely derailed while you're waiting on Microsoft to actually have, because again,
Absolutely.
it's not always the case that you're going to get, by any stretch of the imagination, better support. You're kind of blind.
I agree.
And I think that's a blame thing. I want to blame them. I use Microsoft and they screwed up, but that doesn't mean that you solved your business problem. And you're still hung up.
And it's pretty rare that that technology stack that they give you includes everything at the exact same level of performance, reliability, and things like that. So, at that point, you've got to think, okay, well, they're giving me, all of this. That's crap, that's crap. I know I'm not using that, so.
Same thing in the security space, and what's missing is this overall enterprise level of visibility for like a suite concept, right? So the suites exist in certain aspects, but enterprise management and stuff like that at times can't get comfortable with slotting these things in and getting the visibility they need. That's exactly what's missing on the security side. Go ahead.
I think, you hit on this point is where, to me, it's about value. It's about return on investment. And sometimes some of these products we buy, they're not fully utilized, and so I don't see getting a full value back. And so having control of how well you integrate that into your business really brings you more and more value. And so from the support standpoint, that requires a deeper understanding by staff of the science and the actual workings of this, rather than from an end user, from a user, sort of a super user standpoint. And so it's about developing almost a better quality of staff that can sort of long-term contribute more towards the productivity of your environment. Because I'm looking at enterprise systems that we use, they are built around a standard business process. Once you start deviating from that, you are taking away from the efficiencies of these sort of fixed systems. And so the more we can customize these and work systems to, I'm not saying change the business process, but work to the nuances and the service needs of our organization, the more value they are able to provide. So I wouldn't break out support by itself. To me, it's just one part of an overall value equation for the enterprise, for us. And that's what we're trying to do. I think Ravi mentioned a little bit about service-oriented architecture. We're looking at that, not looking at that. That's something we practice a lot, because you look at it from a service perspective rather than all these stovepipe systems across campus. And then in the background, how do you bring those together to provide, everybody uses the word seamless, but, as close to seamless as possible to the end user. So this is embedded as part of their everyday work and process, and how to make them most productive. So in these hard times when we have about 40% less staff, that is very, very useful, because the end user doesn't really care what product or system you use, as long as they can do their job.
At times in the past, it's been the lack of a single pane of glass for both the user.
Yeah.
So,
Back to my original question, which was largely answered, but one thing stands out to me, and that's the accessibility of open source. If my folks are, picking it up, installing it, testing it, and bringing, pilot solutions or little things to us, we're going to carry it on. If they're bringing us things because we have, Microsoft in-house or the enterprise agreements with Oracle and et cetera, if they're using those tools and bringing us solutions, we're going to build upon them. And so it's really that accessibility of open source. If our people are doing it, we'll run with it. We're not dictating the innovation that has to come from people.
Jeffrey's point earlier today, the developers are driving the decision-making process probably now more than ever.
Absolutely.
Okay, Deb?
So in 2005, I experienced understanding what that gap is between, as Forrester mentioned, a very high awareness and use of open source when you talk to line managers and supervisors and developers. And then you ask CIOs, and they don't know. In 2005, someone in the Oregon legislature decided to make it a law that all agencies should use open source, and prove that you couldn't use that first before you even did an RFP for anything else. And I was in the astonishing and awkward role of actually testifying against the bill. So just to let you know, I've been on both sides of that equation. It wasn't a good bill, but what we did discover was that there was lots of open source, but most of it was happening in infrastructure, in areas where a CIO doesn't need to engage, things like firewalls and network security and data center plumbing. And so the change in the last 3 or 4 years is there are more enterprise-level applications available, so you have to think differently. It has to be the long-term planning. It has to be the 5-year plan. You have to think about what your legacy application, your environment looks like. There's open source maturity models to help you evaluate whether a particular application is ready, and it takes organizational readiness. It takes a plan to bring in skilled workers because the skill set is different. So it really needs to be a thoughtful process, and I think we have to wrench it out of the hands and have a partnership with a really passionate, smart, open source people that work for us, and the CIOs, because the business community and the people that are experts there are the business people. The experts, when we were developing Linux and other applications for the infrastructure, the experts were the people that are using the applications. That's not true anymore. The applications we want to use, the experts are the people that are using the content management systems, that are using business systems, financial systems, health systems. And so we're having to move to a different model. That's what we'll have to pay a lot of attention to and have a better partnership between the folks that are brilliant technically and the users, the business community users that have an
Building that
obligation.
bridge is not easy sometimes,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I wouldn't have a job if I didn't get to do that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, you guys have any? My next question is this. Again, we sort of broke this up. I approached it from the support angle, which, was accurate maybe to a degree, but there were so many other things to it. From a, we actually have students. Do we have any students here? Any students at all? Okay, a couple. Believe it or not, this is very important to you because as you acquire the skills, you need to be listening to what is being used. What are businesses actually using? And if you can become talented and you can pick up those skills, your marketability increases exponentially. So you need to be listening to what these guys are saying. From a preparedness standpoint, do you find that people have the skills that you need, or your current? Most of your staffs, are they older? Are they younger? Is there, because what we found is, for instance, in state government here, state government, again, a few agencies that we work with, want to utilize open source software. Their issue is, again, our staff, maybe, older maybe, and I'm going to use that in a very generic way, but they don't have the skills. So if I have one hotshot guy, young kid that comes in, he has a better solution, it happens to be open source, and then, we're looking to support it internally and around it. I've got to retrain my guys, and it's not easy to teach this technology to other people. Have you guys seen that from an educational standpoint? Kush, I know you guys are focused on that. Is open source even on the radar?
I'll start with that on the way of course, being with the college system, I work with several curriculum development committees, and Bob's in front. I know he's deeply involved in many of these processes. This is a conversation not specifically around open source, but around support in general. What makes a useful employee really, and what are the attributes, skill sets that do that? Some of the things that have come up in these conversations is, as I mentioned before, the need for a deeper understanding of the science of this. Products come and go, but you have to know how things work in order to be able to truly get in there and do something. And so we are finding that some of the employers are giving us feedback that, from an operations support standpoint, great. People go to some academy, know which buttons to punch and know what the end result needs to be. But when that doesn't work, they really don't know what to do after that. And so we're looking for, a little bit of that old school knowledge, as we call it. And by the way, older is a relative term, that's what it is. And so we're trying to do that.